The metal spoon slipped from Hannah's hand and clanged against the side of the big silver pot. Hot steam rose into her face, but she didn't move. The whole street went quiet. Even the noisy yellow buses seemed to pause. A long black car had just stopped in front of her tiny food stand, right there by the dusty roadside where she sold rice and beans every day. The door opened and a tall man in a dark suit stepped out. His watch looked like it could pay her rent for 10 years. Two men in matching suits followed him, their eyes sharp like they were guarding something very important. The rich man looked around slowly, then pointed straight at Hannah's stand. "Who is the woman that sells food here?" he asked, his voice calm but strong. Nobody answered. People just stared. A few neighbors shifted back, unsure. The man raised a photo in his hand so everyone could see. "I'm looking for the homeless widow this woman has been feeding every day," he said. "I need to find her, now." Hannah's heart started beating so fast she thought it would jump out of her chest. Her little son squeezed her apron from behind, hiding his face. The homeless widow, the one who sat under the broken streetlight. How did a billionaire know about her, and why was he asking for the person who fed her? The man's eyes slowly moved across the crowd until they landed right on Hannah's face. His gaze held her like a hand on her shoulder. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. "And who has been taking care of her?" Hi friends, welcome to today's story. Poor food seller fed a homeless widow every day. One day, a billionaire came looking for her tailies. Before we go deeper, please like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in New York, London, South Africa, Jamaica, or somewhere else in the world? Your support helps these life-changing stories reach more people. Now, let's go back to where it all started. Every morning before the sun was fully up, Hannah Brooks tied her faded green scarf around her hair, slipped on her worn-out sneakers, and whispered a small prayer over her little one-room apartment. The room was tiny, the ceiling a bit cracked, and the walls carried old stains from years of rain and heat. But to Hannah and her 8-year-old son, Noah, it was home. She moved quietly so she wouldn't wake him too soon. He slept on a thin mattress in the corner, hugging a small stuffed lion someone had given him a long time ago. Hannah checked his face, brushed a hand over his curly hair, and smiled. "I'll make it better for you," she whispered softly. "One day all this will change." In the small kitchen area, she filled a big pot with water and set it on the gas stove. The blue flame flickered weakly. She counted the rice twice. She always counted. If she used too much, she wouldn't have enough to sell. If she used too little, people would complain and not come back tomorrow. Life felt like that every day, always trying to stretch something small to cover something big. While the pot started to boil, her phone buzzed on the table. She checked the screen and saw her mother's name. With a quick swipe, she answered. "Hi, Mom," she said gently. "How are you feeling this morning?" "I'm fine, baby," her mother replied, but her voice sounded tired. "Don't worry about me, just take care of Noah and the business." Hannah swallowed hard and looked at the medicine box sitting in the corner. It was almost empty. The last time she went to buy pills for her mother's blood pressure, she had to choose between paying half the house rent or buying all the medicine. She chose the medicine. The landlord was already angry, but she couldn't let her mother suffer. "I'll send a little something later," Hannah said softly. "Just rest, okay?" After the call, she packed the food containers, counted the spoons again, and woke Noah. "Time for school, champ," she said. He rubbed his eyes and smiled up at her. "Are you tired, Mom?" he asked, noticing the faint shadows under her eyes. "A little," she answered, forcing a smile. "But tired people still win, right?" Noah nodded with a grin. "Right." He grabbed his small backpack, and together they left the small apartment, locking the door behind them. The walk to her food stand took about 20 minutes. The street was already waking up. Market women dragged tables into place. Bus drivers shouted for passengers. Horns blared. People rushed past each other chasing a little bit of money before the day got old. Hannah's spot was not special. It was just a simple wooden table near the corner of a busy road under a shaky umbrella that didn't fully protect her from the sun or the rain. But it was her spot. Her whole dream stood on that small piece of ground. She arranged her pots, wiping the table carefully. The first customers would be coming soon: construction workers, office assistants, students, anyone who needed cheap, hot food in the morning. On that first day, months before the black car appeared, Hannah saw the widow for the very first time. At first, she didn't even notice her. She was too busy serving rice and beans to a line of hungry workers. "Add a little more, Hannah," one man said, smiling with tired eyes. "You always want a little more," she replied, shaking her head but still adding one extra spoon. She tried to be firm, but kindness kept slipping out of her hands like water. When the line went down and the rush slowed, Hannah finally saw her. The woman was sitting on the ground under a broken streetlight post, her back against the dirty wall. Her gray scarf was wrapped tightly around her head, and her old brown dress looked like it had seen too many rainy seasons. A small bag sat beside her, flat and empty. Her face was thin and her fingers trembled slightly as she held them together on her lap. She didn't beg. She just sat there, staring at Hannah's food stand with a tired, hungry look in her eyes. Hannah watched her for a minute. The woman didn't move closer or call out. She just kept her hands folded and her eyes down like she was trying not to disturb anyone. Something inside Hannah's chest squeezed. She knew that feeling too well, the feeling of needing help but being too tired or too ashamed to ask. She turned to her half-full pot, then quickly to her cash box. It was still almost empty. It was early. This food was supposed to pay for Noah's school books, her mother's medicine, and at least part of the rent. But the woman's thin hands were shaking. Her lips were dry. Hannah picked up a plate. Her mind shouted numbers and worries, gas money, rice money, tomorrow's food, the landlord's angry voice, but her heart moved faster than her head. She filled the plate with rice and beans and added a small piece of meat. Then she grabbed a spoon and walked over. "Good morning, ma'am," she said softly. The woman looked up, surprised. Her eyes were tired but gentle. "This is for you," Hannah said. "It's fresh." The woman's mouth fell open a little. I don't have any money," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it hadn't been used much. "You don't need money today," Hannah replied. "Just eat, please." For a second, the woman looked like she might refuse. Pride flashed in her eyes along with pain. Then she took the plate and her fingers brushed Hannah's hand. They were cold. "Thank you," the woman said, and a tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. "My name is Ellen." "Hannah," she replied with a small smile. "I'm just over there if you want water too." She walked back to her stand before her fear could catch up with her. She had just given away food for free when she didn't even know if she would sell out that day. But when she turned to look again, she saw Ellen eating slowly, her eyes closing for a second like every bite was a miracle. Something about that made Hannah's tired heart feel a little stronger. That first day she told herself it was a one-time thing, just this morning, just this plate. But the next day when she reached her corner, Ellen was already there, sitting under the same broken post, hands folded the same way. Her scarf was the same, her dress was the same, but her eyes now carried a tiny spark of hope as they watched Hannah set up the food table. Hannah tried to look away, but she couldn't. She filled one extra plate before the customers came. When Ellen noticed, she shook her head weakly. "You shouldn't," she said. "You have a child, you should keep everything you have." Hannah shrugged and smiled, pretending it was nothing. "If I can feed 10 people and still sleep at night, I can feed 11, she said. "Sit, eat, that's all." So it became a silent promise. Every day before the rush, Hannah put aside one plate. Sometimes it had meat, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it was a small portion because business was slow, but one plate always waited for Ellen. Of course people noticed. People always notice when someone gives without getting anything back. A woman who sold fruits nearby shook her head one afternoon. "Hannah, you're too soft," she said as she packed oranges into a basket. "Soft people stay poor, do you know that?" Hannah laughed lightly, but there was a sting inside her chest. "Maybe," she answered, "but if I stop being kind, I'll feel even poorer." Another man, a regular customer, watched as Ellen finished her food and carefully wiped the plate clean before handing it back. "You're wasting money on that old woman," he said under his breath. "She doesn't even buy water. Let her find food somewhere else." Hannah didn't argue. She just washed the plate and went back to serving. But later, when she looked at the small amount of cash in her box, his words echoed in her head. One especially hard week, rain fell almost every day. Customers stayed home or bought food closer to their offices. Hannah's shoes stayed wet, her scarf never really dried. She counted her coins every night and felt her stomach twist. At the end of the week, her landlord, Mr. Brown, came knocking. He was a big man with a stomach that pushed against his shirt buttons. He stood in her doorway, arms crossed. "Hannah, I've been patient," he said, "but patience doesn't pay bills. You are already 2 weeks late. One more week and you will have to leave." "I understand," Hannah said softly, her fingers tight around the edge of the door. "Please, just a little more time. Business has been slow because of the rain. I will catch up." Mr. Brown sighed, his face softening only a little. "You're a good girl," he said, "but good doesn't pay. One more week, that's all." When he left, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands to her face. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Noah came and sat beside her, leaning his head on her shoulder. "It will be okay, Mom," he said quietly, trying to sound brave. "You always find a way." The next morning, when she saw Ellen waiting again, Hannah's heart almost broke. She stood over her pot of rice, spoon in hand, and argued with herself inside. "You can't do this today," her fear said. "You're late on rent, every grain matters, every plate is money." But then she looked up and saw Ellen holding her stomach gently, her lips pressed together. Hunger had its own kind of voice, even when a mouth stayed closed. Hannah filled the plate. This time it was smaller. She added extra sauce to make it look like more. She carried it over and placed it on Ellen's lap. "I thought you might be hungry," she said softly. Ellen looked at her with eyes that shone with tears. "You should be angry with me," Ellen whispered. "You should tell me to go away. You have so many problems, I can see it in your eyes." Hannah sat on the low cement block nearby and shook her head. "I do have problems," she said honestly. My rent, my mom's health, my son's school. Sometimes I feel like the world is squeezing my chest, but when I feed you, I remember that I still have something to give. It makes me feel less scared." Ellen stared at her for a long moment, then smiled, a small, shaky smile. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said quietly. "Someone who gave when she had nothing. People didn't understand her either, but her life changed in a way no one expected." "Did she become rich?" Hannah asked, half joking, half hopping. Ellen looked up at the sky. "She found help," she replied. "The kind of help that only comes to hearts that don't close." Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Hannah and Ellen never had long talks, but they learned each other's small habits. Hannah noticed how Ellen always divided her food, eating half and keeping half for later. She noticed how Ellen always said thank you twice, once with her mouth and once with her eyes. Some mornings Ellen would whisper soft things like, "May kindness follow your son wherever he goes," or "May your hands never be empty." One afternoon, when business was slow, Hannah noticed Ellen writing in a small old notebook. Her hands moved carefully, her letters were neat. "What are you writing?" Hannah asked curiously. Ellen closed the notebook gently and smiled. "Names," she replied, "stories, promises." "Promises," Hannah frowned. "To who?" "To the people who fed me," Ellen said. "To the people who didn't walk past me like I was trash. Maybe one day someone will ask for these names. I want to be ready." Hannah laughed softly. "Who would ask for them?" she said. "No one even knows you're here." Ellen's eyes held a strange light for a second, like she knew something Hannah didn't. "You never know who is watching," she answered. "You never know who is listening." One evening, as Hannah was closing her stand, she found Noah standing beside Ellen, sharing his small packet of biscuits with her. "You've been giving my mom blessings," he told Ellen simply, "so I want to give you something too." Ellen's hands shook as she took one biscuit. "You are rich," she told Noah. He blinked, confused. "I don't have anything," he said. "We don't even have a car." "You have a mother who gives," Ellen replied. "That makes you richer than many people in big houses." The next morning the widow didn't come. For the first time in many weeks the broken streetlight corner was empty. Hannah set aside a plate as usual, but as the sun moved higher and the rush came and went, the plate stayed untouched. She tried to focus on customers, but her eyes kept jumping to that empty space. Maybe she was sick, maybe she had moved away, maybe something bad had happened. Hannah felt a strange emptiness in her chest. At the end of the day, when she packed up, she wrapped the untouched food and gave it to another hungry boy on the street. But that night, she couldn't sleep. The second day, the corner was still empty. Noah noticed too. "Where is Miss Ellen?" he asked. "Do you think she's okay?" Hannah forced a smile. "Maybe she found a better place," she said, but even as she said it, worry crawled up her spine. She kept looking at every older woman who passed by, hoping to see that familiar gray scarf. Nothing. On the third morning, she woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. She almost didn't want to go to work. It felt wrong to set up her stand without seeing Ellen sitting there, quiet and patient. But bills don't wait for feelings, so she got up, cooked, and walked to her corner with Noah. As she reached the street, she saw something she had never seen there before. A long black car was parked near her spot, a car so shiny it looked like water under the sun. People were standing around it, staring, pointing, whispering. Market women paused in their work. Children stood on their toes to see better. A few men took out their phones to record video. Hannah's steps slowed. She pulled Noah closer. "Stay by my side," she said. "Don't move away, okay?" "Wow, Mom," Noah whispered. "Is that a movie?" Hannah didn't answer. Her heart was pounding again. She squeezed through the small crowd and reached her table. Her pots were still there, untouched. But now the fancy car was right in front of her stand. The door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, with neatly combed dark hair and a calm, serious face. His suit fit perfectly and his shoes shone like they had never touched dust before. A watch sparkled on his wrist. Two bodyguards followed, scanning the crowd carefully. The man looked around, then focused on Hannah's table. He walked toward her, every step slow and sure, like he already knew exactly where he was going. Hannah's mouth went dry. She held the spoon tighter, trying not to let her hand shake. Noah hid partly behind her waist, peeking out with wide eyes. "Good morning," the man said. His voice was deep but not harsh. "Are you the one who sells food here?" Hannah nodded nervously. "Why, yes, sir," she replied. "Rice and beans, sometimes stew. We also have water." He didn't look at the pots. Instead, he pulled a folded photo from his pocket and opened it. He lifted it so she and everyone else could see. The whole crowd leaned in. Hannah felt like the ground under her feet moved. It was Ellen, the same gray scarf, the same kind eyes, the same tired but gentle smile. "I am looking for this woman," the man said, his voice suddenly softer. "I've been searching for her for a long time. People told me she was seen in this area. They said a woman who sells food here has been feeding her every day." Murmurs filled the air. "Feeding her? Which woman? Is it Hannah?" Hannah's fingers tightened around the spoon until her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hardly hear the noise around her. Noah looked up at her, eyes big as if asking, "Is this about us?" The man's gaze found hers and held it. "Do you know her?" he asked quietly. "Do you know where she is?" Before Hannah could answer, he took a small step closer. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not cold like she expected from someone so rich. They were full of worry and something else, something like guilt or pain. He glanced at her hands, rough from lifting heavy pots, then back to her face. "I'm Lucas Hayes," he said, his voice low but clear. Some people gasped. The name was famous. He owned big companies, tall buildings, and hotels that Hannah had only seen in pictures. She had heard his name on the radio before, always followed by words like millions and billions. But right now, he didn't look like a man counting money. He looked like a man running out of time. "I was told," Lucas continued, holding the photo of Ellen close to his chest, "that someone here showed her kindness when no one else did, that someone fed her when she had nothing. I came to find that person." His eyes locked onto Hannah's again, and this time there was no mistaking it. He wasn't just talking to the crowd, he was talking to her. Noah's small hand slipped into hers. She felt him trembling, or maybe that was her own hand shaking. The fruit seller who once teased her for giving free food stared with wide eyes. The man who complained about her wasting money leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Everyone could feel it, the air was thick with something big, something about to break open. Lucas took a deep breath. "Whoever has been feeding this widow," he said slowly, "changed more than one life without even knowing it." He looked directly at Hannah now, his voice barely above a whisper but heavy enough to sit in every ear. "And if that person is standing here today," he paused, his words hanging in the air like a held breath, "their life is about to change too." The crowd fell completely silent. Pots stopped clanking. Bus horns faded into the background. Even the wind seemed to hold still. Hannah felt the world pressing on her from every side. Was this really happening? Was this really about Ellen, the quiet widow who sat under the broken streetlight, whispering small blessings over her? What did this billionaire want with a homeless widow and with the poor food seller who fed her? Hannah opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her heart was beating so loudly that it drowned out her voice. Lucas took one more step toward her stand, his eyes never leaving hers. Noah tightened his grip on her hand, his small fingers digging into her skin. Tears she didn't understand burned behind her eyes. "Tell me," Lucas said gently but firmly, holding out the photo of Ellen. "Are you the one who fed her?" And right there, with the whole street watching, with her past struggles and her future hanging in the balance, Hannah realized that her answer could change everything, not just for her, but for her son, for her mother, and for a homeless widow whose story was clearly not as simple as it seemed. The world around Hannah seemed to disappear. All she could hear was the quick thump of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. The man in the dark suit, Lucas Hayes, the billionaire people whispered about, was now standing right in front of her, waiting for an answer. His question still floated in the air like heavy smoke. "Are you the one who fed her?" She wanted to speak, to tell him yes, that she did it without expecting anything, that she didn't even know who the woman really was, but her voice stuck in her throat. All her life, no one had ever looked at her with that much focus before. It was as if this man could see right into her soul. Noah squeezed her hand again, reminding her that she wasn't alone. She finally nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered, "I fed her." A low murmur ran through the crowd. Someone gasped, another person whispered, "She's the one." Hannah's cheeks flushed, her stomach twisted with both fear and confusion. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening slightly, then he turned to one of his bodyguards. "Call them," he said quietly. The man nodded and stepped aside to make a phone call. Lucas turned back to Hannah. "Do you know where she is now?" he asked. Hannah swallowed hard. "No sir, she stopped coming 3 days ago. I looked for her, she wasn't at the corner." Lucas's eyes darkened, a shadow of worry crossing his face. "She's missing?" he asked softly. "I don't know," Hannah replied. "Maybe she found help somewhere else. Maybe she wouldn't leave without saying goodbye," he interrupted gently but firmly. His tone carried something more than concern, it carried guilt. She never leaves without leaving a sign, he added, half to himself. Hannah frowned. You know her? Lucas hesitated, then nodded. I should have known her better, he said bitterly. She's my mother. The words dropped like thunder. The whole street froze again. Hannah's eyes widened. Your mother, she repeated. Lucas nodded slowly. Her name is Ellen Hayes. She disappeared from my home a year ago after my father died. No one could find her. We searched everywhere, hospitals, churches, shelters. Then a few weeks ago, someone sent me a photo of her sitting by a food stand. This food stand. He looked around the street, then back at Hannah. I didn't believe it at first. My mother was a strong woman. She never looked weak or homeless a day in her life. But then I saw her eyes, and I knew it was her. Tears stung the corners of Hannah's eyes. She remembered Ellen's soft smile, the way she blessed her every morning. She had never imagined the quiet widow under the broken streetlight could be someone's mother, a billionaire's mother. She never told me her last name, Hannah whispered. She just said her name was Ellen. Lucas's voice broke slightly. She didn't want anyone to know who she was. I hurt her badly before she left, and now I don't know if I still have the chance to make it right. Before Hannah could say anything, the bodyguard returned. Sir, the car is ready, he said. Lucas nodded, then turned back to her. I need your help, he said simply. You're the only person who was close to her these past months. You know her habits, her places. Will you help me find her? Hannah blinked, her heart pounding. Me, she asked incredulously. I'm just a food seller. Lucas shook his head. You're not just anything. You fed a woman the world forgot. You did more for her than anyone else did. Hannah looked at Noah, then back at Lucas. I want to help, she said finally, but I don't know where to start. Lucas nodded slowly. Tell me everything you remember about her, he said. Every detail. They sat on two plastic chairs under the umbrella of her stand. The crowd slowly drifted away, leaving a few curious faces still watching from afar. Hannah told him how she first met Ellen, how the widow sat quietly under the broken light, how she refused food at first, how she prayed for Hannah and her son every morning. Lucas listened carefully, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes never leaving Hannah's face. She wrote in a notebook sometimes, Hannah added suddenly. Lucas looked up. A notebook? Yes, Hannah said. It was small, old, brown. She said she was writing names and promises. Lucas's breath caught. My father had one like that, he said softly. He used to write letters to people he helped. After he died, Mom started doing the same. Maybe she was still writing them out there. He stood up suddenly. I want to see the place she used to sit, he said. Hannah led him down the street, past the fruit seller, past the bus stop, to the spot under the broken light. The metal pole still leaned to one side. A few discarded plastic bags blew around in the breeze. A small piece of fabric was caught on a nail, gray like the edge of Ellen's scarf. Lucas knelt down and touched it gently, his eyes closed. She was here, he whispered, then his hand moved toward the ground. There, half buried in dust, was a small brown book. Hannah gasped. The notebook, she said. Lucas picked it up slowly, brushing away the dirt. The cover was worn, the edges torn, but it was still intact. He opened the first page and his hands began to tremble. Inside were names, dozens of them written in Ellen's neat handwriting. Next to each name was a short note. Gave me bread, spoke kindly to me, did not judge me. Then on the last page, written in slightly shaky letters, were the words, Hannah Brooks fed me every day, showed me what grace feels like. If this book is found, tell my son that love still exists in the world. Lucas pressed the notebook to his chest. For a moment, his strong, business-hardened face broke completely. He took a step back and turned away, his shoulders shaking. Hannah looked down, not wanting to embarrass him, but her own eyes filled with tears too. I didn't know she was writing about me, Hannah said softly. She never said anything. Lucas wiped his face with his handkerchief and took a deep breath. Thank you, he said hoarsely. You have no idea what you've done for her and for me. He closed the notebook carefully and looked around again. She must be somewhere close, he said. I need to find her before it's too late. He turned to his driver. Search the nearest clinics, shelters, and police posts, he ordered. Then he looked back at Hannah. Would you come with me? Hannah hesitated. I have my stand, she said quietly. If I don't sell today, I won't make rent. Lucas looked at her in surprise, then he nodded slowly. I understand, he said. He reached into his pocket and took out a bundle of cash. Here, he said, consider this a loan, not a gift, a loan for today so you can help me find her without worrying about rent. Hannah stared at the money like it was fire. I can't take that, she said firmly. Lucas smiled slightly. Then call it payment for the food you gave my mother all those days, he said softly. She owed you more than this? He placed the money on her table and walked toward the car. Hannah stood frozen for a moment before grabbing Noah's hand and following him. The car ride felt like a dream. Noah's eyes were wide as he looked at the leather seats and glass windows. "Mom, this is like a palace," he whispered. Lucas smiled briefly before focusing on his phone. He was calling someone named Emma, his assistant, telling her to check every record of a woman matching Ellen's description in local clinics and church outreach programs. Hannah watched him quietly. He didn't seem like the arrogant rich men she had seen on TV. There was something tired and sad about him, as if money had solved everything except what he needed most. They stopped at a small clinic first. The nurse behind the desk looked up, startled to see Lucas Hayes in person. When he showed her the photo, she nodded slowly. "Yes, she was here," the nurse said. "She came 3 days ago. She had a fever and looked weak. We gave her medicine, but she refused to stay. She kept saying she had to go somewhere important." Lucas's brow furrowed. "Did she say where she was going?" "She mentioned a church," the nurse said. "St. Mary's, I think." "Take us there," Lucas told his driver. The car pulled onto the main road. As they drove, Hannah looked out the window at the passing city. For the first time, she was seeing it from a different angle, through a car window instead of on foot. She wondered if this moment meant something bigger, something that God was trying to show her. Maybe her small kindness was never small at all. When they reached the church, an old priest stood by the gate. He recognized Ellen immediately from the photo. "She was here yesterday," he said kindly. "She came to pray for someone. She didn't say who, but she cried a lot. After she left, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, 'When you find my son, tell him I forgive him even if he never asks me to.'" Lucas's eyes filled again. "Did she say where she was going after that?" The priest shook his head. "She only said she was going home." "Home," Lucas repeated softly. "But she has no home." The priest smiled sadly. "Maybe she meant something else, my son. Maybe she meant peace." Those words hung heavy in the air as they left the church. Hannah noticed how Lucas's hands shook slightly as he held the notebook. She wanted to say something comforting but didn't know what. "Sir," she said quietly, "she talked about you once. She said you'd been through a lot." She didn't sound angry. She sounded sad but hopeful. Lucas nodded slowly. "She always was. I was the one who was angry." He looked out the window and began to speak, his voice low. "My father was a good man. He built our business from nothing. But after he died, I became cold. I worked day and night to prove I could be strong like him. When Mom asked me to slow down to spend time with the family, I told her she didn't understand real life. I said things I can't even repeat. The next morning, she was gone." He swallowed hard. "I thought she'd gone to stay with relatives. When she didn't return after a week, I started to worry. I searched everywhere, but there was no trace. I thought she might be dead." Hannah looked at him, her eyes soft. "She wasn't dead," she said. "She was just waiting for love to find her again." Lucas smiled faintly, pain mixed with gratitude. "And somehow, love found her through you." As the car turned down a quiet side street, something caught Hannah's eye. A familiar gray scarf lay crumpled near a bench by a small park. "Stop!" she shouted suddenly. The driver hit the brakes and everyone leaned forward slightly. Hannah jumped out, running toward the bench. The scarf was Ellen's. There was no mistake. Beside it was a small piece of paper, folded neatly. Lucas picked it up and opened it. The handwriting was weak but clear. It said, "If you find this, don't worry. I'm going to a place I once called home, the old cottage by the lake. Don't cry. I'm not lost. I'm just finding peace." Lucas looked up sharply. "The cottage," he said. "Our family had one years ago, before the company, before the money. We used to go there every summer. I haven't been there since I was a teenager." He turned to the driver. "Take us to Lakeview Cottage." The journey took almost 2 hours. As they drove, the city turned into quiet roads lined with trees, then into open fields. The smell of wet grass filled the air. The closer they got, the more Hannah could feel the weight in the car. Lucas stared out the window, lost in memories. Noah leaned against Hannah's shoulder, half asleep. Finally, they reached the lake. The old cottage stood near the water, small but beautiful, though time had clearly touched it. The paint was peeling and the front steps creaked as they walked up. The door was unlocked. Lucas pushed it open slowly. The air inside smelled of dust and old wood. On the table sat a single teacup, still half full. A soft humming sound came from the next room. "Mom," Lucas called softly. There was silence for a second, then a weak voice answered, "Lucas." They rushed in. There she was, Ellen, lying on a small couch by the window, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. Lucas dropped to his knees beside her, taking her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been searching for you everywhere." Tears rolled freely down his cheeks. "I hurt you and you still forgave me." Ellen smiled weakly. "I forgave you the moment you walked away," she whispered. "I just wanted you to learn what love looks like, and you did. You found her." She turned her gaze toward Hannah, who stood frozen near the doorway, her eyes wide. "You fed me when no one else saw me," Ellen said softly. "You reminded me that grace is still alive in the world." Hannah stepped forward, kneeling down too. "I only did what anyone should do," she said, tears filling her own eyes. Ellen shook her head. "No, my dear, you did what many wouldn't. You gave without asking who I was. That's rare." Lucas looked at Hannah, then back at his mother. "We're taking you to the hospital," he said firmly. Ellen smiled faintly. "No hospitals today, son. Just stay here. Let's be a family again just for a while." The sun slowly sank over the lake, painting the water in gold and orange. They sat together in silence for a long time, Lucas holding his mother's hand, Hannah and Noah sitting nearby. For a brief moment, everything felt still, peaceful, complete. As evening fell, Ellen drifted into sleep, her breathing soft and even. Lucas covered her with the blanket and looked at Hannah. "You saved her," he said quietly. "And you saved me too." Hannah shook her head. "I didn't save anyone, I just shared food." Lucas smiled sadly. "Sometimes sharing food is how you save a soul." They stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, and the stars were beginning to show. Lucas looked out at the water, then at Hannah again. "I don't know how to thank you," he said honestly. "You don't need to," she replied. "Just be kind to someone else, that's thanks enough." Lucas nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "I think I can do more than that," he said quietly. But before Hannah could ask what he meant, a faint sound came from inside, a cough, then silence. Lucas froze. "Mom!" He rushed back inside, Hannah and Noah close behind. Ellen's eyes were open, but she looked peaceful, a small smile on her face. "Lucas," she whispered weakly, "promise me you'll take care of them like they took care of me." Lucas's throat tightened. "I promise," he said, gripping her hand. Her fingers squeezed his once, then loosened. The room went quiet. "Mom," Lucas whispered again, but she didn't answer. He bowed his head, silent tears falling onto her blanket. Hannah put a trembling hand on his shoulder. Noah hugged her leg, his small face buried in her dress. Outside, the last light of the sun faded over the lake. The wind rustled the trees softly, almost like a whisper saying goodbye. And that was how the poor food seller who once gave her last plate of rice to a stranger found herself standing in a cottage beside a billionaire, united not by money or status, but by love, loss, and the quiet power of kindness. But this was not the end, because what Lucas did next would change everything for Hannah and Noah in ways they never imagined. The following morning began with the sound of soft rain against the cottage windows. The lake outside looked gray and still, like a mirror reflecting the sadness inside. Lucas sat beside his mother's couch, his hand still holding hers even though they had already gone cold. The blanket covered her up to her shoulders. For the first time in years, there was peace on her face, peace that money could never buy and regret could never steal. Hannah stood quietly near the doorway, her heart heavy. She wanted to say something comforting, but the silence itself felt sacred, like a prayer no one wanted to interrupt. When the first light of dawn finally touched the floor, Lucas stood up slowly. His suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes red from crying, but there was a calmness about him now, something different from the restless, controlled man who had stepped out of that black car a day before. "She's gone home," he said softly, his voice steady, "just like she said she would." Hannah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She was a good woman," she whispered. "Even when she had nothing, she gave blessings." Lucas looked at her, his expression full of gratitude. "And you gave her hope," he said quietly. "You were her last friend." They buried Ellen later that day by the edge of the lake under a tall tree that bent gently over the water. The air smelled of wet grass and lilac. Lucas arranged for a simple coffin and a small cross. He refused to call anyone from the press or his company. "This isn't news," he told Hannah softly. "This is love." The three of them, Lucas, Hannah, and Noah, stood together as the priest said the final prayer. The rain stopped halfway through and a beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, touching the lake's surface. Noah pointed quietly. "Look," he said, "it's like she's shining." Lucas smiled faintly through tears. "Maybe she is," he whispered. "Maybe she's finally free." After the burial, he stayed by the water for a long time, holding the notebook Ellen had written in. The pages fluttered in the wind, full of names of strangers who had shown kindness when no one was watching. Hannah watched him from a few steps away, holding Noah's hand. There was something deeply human about the sight of a billionaire kneeling in the mud beside a grave, whispering to God with tears in his eyes. By evening they drove back toward the city. The car felt quieter now, heavier. Lucas sat in silence, staring out the window. Hannah wanted to give him space, but her heart ached for him. She knew the pain of losing someone. She had almost lost her mother once when the hospital refused to treat her until they paid. She knew what it felt like to fight between grief and survival. Noah eventually fell asleep, his small head resting on her arm. Halfway through the drive, Lucas spoke without looking away from the window. "Do you believe everything happens for a reason?" he asked softly. Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," she said, "even when the reason hurts." He nodded slowly. "I think I do too. Maybe my mother met you so I could see the world again, the world beyond money, power, and business meetings." He finally turned toward her. "When I first saw you at that food stand, I thought you looked strong, not just strong in body, but strong in heart. You reminded me of her." Hannah looked down, embarrassed. "I'm not strong," she said quietly. "I just keep going because I have to." Lucas shook his head. "That's what strength is." The car stopped near her street. Hannah looked out at her small neighborhood, rusty roofs, narrow alleys, vendors shouting as they packed up for the day. It felt strange returning after everything that had happened. The world looked the same, but she had changed. "Thank you for bringing me," she said softly. Lucas smiled faintly. "No, Hannah, thank you for bringing me back to myself." He opened the glove box, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "A small gift," he said, "for your kindness, for the food you gave my mother, for the time you lost helping me." She tried to hand it back. "I can't take this, sir." He shook his head firmly. "You're not taking it, you've already earned it." When she finally opened the envelope that night after putting Noah to bed, she gasped. Inside was a check with more zeros than she had ever seen in her life. Her hands shook as she covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Is this real?" Tears filled her eyes. She thought of all the nights she had gone to bed hungry so Noah could eat. She thought of her mother's hospital bills and the rent she had been fighting to pay. This one piece of paper could change everything. The next morning, Lucas came by her stand again. The same crowd that had watched the billionaire's arrival 2 days earlier now watched him in disbelief. Some whispered, some smiled, and some tried to sell him things. Lucas ignored the attention and walked straight to her table. "How's business today?" he asked lightly. Hannah smiled shyly. "Better," she said. "People came to see the rich man's friend. I sold out before noon." He laughed softly. "Then I should visit more often." He sat on the plastic chair beside her while she poured him a small plate of rice and beans. "You don't have to pay," she said quickly. "This one's on me." Lucas smiled. "Then I'll take it as a blessing." He ate quietly, slowly, tasting each bite. "You know," he said after a while, "this is better than most hotel food I've had." Hannah laughed softly. "That's because I cook with fear," she said. "Fear of hunger if it doesn't sell." Lucas chuckled. "Then maybe fear is a good spice." They talked like that for a while, easily, like old friends. People around them whispered and stared, but neither seemed to care. When it was time for him to leave, Lucas stood up and said, "Hannah, I meant what I said yesterday. I owe you more than I can repay." Hannah shook her head quickly. "Please, sir, don't say that. I didn't do it for anything. I just saw someone hungry." Lucas smiled, his eyes kind. "And that's exactly why you deserve everything good coming your way." He looked around the small stand thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "with better space, more equipment, and some staff, this could grow into something big." Hannah blinked in surprise. "It's just a roadside stand," she said. "It feeds people, yes, but it's not big." Lucas shook his head. "You feed people with dignity. That's bigger than most businesses I know. Let me help you expand." "Expand," she repeated, almost laughing. "Sir, I don't even have a proper kitchen." Lucas grinned slightly. "You will." 2 days later, Lucas's car returned, not with him alone this time, but with a small team. Architects, a project manager, and a designer. They measured the space, took notes, and discussed things Hannah didn't even understand. Within a week, the old wooden table was replaced with a small but bright food kiosk painted yellow and white. Her name was written neatly at the top, "Hannah's Kitchen, fresh meals, honest hands." She almost cried when she saw it. The opening day felt like a festival. Locals gathered around, clapping as Hannah cut a small ribbon with trembling hands. Lucas stood beside her, smiling like a proud brother. "This is yours," he said quietly. "Run it well, feed people like you always have." Hannah's mother came too, walking slowly with a cane but smiling brighter than she had in years. "God used your kindness," she told Hannah softly. "He saw the seed you planted, and now you're reaping joy." Within weeks, the little kiosk became a favorite in the area. Office workers, students, and even drivers came from other streets to buy food. Hannah hired 2 helpers, both single mothers struggling like she once did. She paid them fairly and fed them daily. Every night she still packed one extra meal in a small bowl and placed it on a bench by the streetlight, Ellen's bench. She couldn't stop doing it. It felt wrong to forget. Lucas visited often, sometimes quietly without bodyguards. He would sit on the same plastic chair, eat rice and beans, and listen to Hannah's stories about life in the neighborhood. Noah grew fond of him, calling him Uncle Luke. They would play small games together while Hannah served customers. For the first time in years, laughter filled her days instead of worry. One Friday afternoon after closing, Lucas asked if he could talk privately. They sat under the umbrella as the sun began to set. "Hannah," he began slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about my mother, about what she wanted me to do with my life. She used to tell me that wealth is useless if it doesn't help someone else stand up. I think I finally understand what she meant." He handed her another brown envelope. Hannah's eyes widened. "No, please," she said quickly. "You've done too much already." Lucas shook his head. "It's not money, open it." Inside was a document, official-looking papers with her name on them. She looked up, confused. "What is this?" "It's your new location," Lucas said softly. "A small restaurant downtown, fully furnished, ready for you to run. I've already registered it under your name. You can keep this kiosk too. Think of the restaurant as the next step." Hannah covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "I don't even know what to say," Lucas smiled. "Say yes." She shook her head, crying. "Why me?" He looked at her gently. "Because my mother chose you before I did. She said you reminded her that love still exists. I'm just finishing what she started." The next few months passed like a miracle unfolding. Hannah's Kitchen opened in the city center, attracting not just locals but even office executives. The story of the poor food seller who helped a homeless widow spread quietly online after someone posted a short video of her feeding people. She didn't know who posted it, but she woke up one morning to see hundreds of customers lining up. When reporters came asking questions, she only said one thing: kindness is never wasted. Lucas kept his promise to his mother. He set up a foundation in Ellen's name, a charity that provided food and training for widows and single mothers. Hannah became one of its directors. At first, she didn't want the title, saying she wasn't educated enough, but Lucas insisted. "You have more heart than half the people I've met in boardrooms," he said. "That's what this foundation needs." With time, her life began to shine in ways she never imagined. Her mother's health improved with proper treatment. Noah got into a good school, and every morning he hugged her before class and said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Those words alone were worth more than money. But even as success found her, Hannah stayed the same. She still woke early, tied her green scarf, prayed over her pots, and made sure one meal was always free for anyone who couldn't pay. People called her the Angel of Main Street. Some said she was lucky, but Hannah knew better. It wasn't luck, it was grace, grace that had passed from Ellen to her, from kindness to kindness like a chain of light. One evening, after closing the restaurant, she visited the lake again. Lucas was already there, standing by his mother's grave. The notebook lay open in his hands. "I read it every week," he said quietly when he saw her. "It keeps me grounded." Hannah smiled softly. "She would be proud of you." He looked up at the sky. "She'd be proud of us," he said. They stood there in silence, the lake shimmering in the moonlight. After a while, Lucas turned to her. "You know," he said, "when I first came to your stand, I thought I was looking for my mother, but maybe I was also looking for redemption." Hannah looked at him with gentle eyes. "And did you find it?" He smiled faintly. "I think I'm still finding it, one good deed at a time." She nodded. "That's how it works. You keep giving and life keeps giving back." The night grew quiet except for the sound of crickets and the soft rustle of the trees. The same stars that had watched Ellen's final sunset now watched over them. For the first time in a long time, Hannah felt peace, pure, deep peace. She had started with a spoon and a pot. Now she had purpose, family, and faith. As they walked back toward their cars, Lucas stopped suddenly and looked at her. "Hannah," he said, "I want you to be part of something bigger. I'm starting a project called Ellen's Table, restaurants that feed both paying and hungry people across the country. I can't think of anyone better to lead it with me." Hannah froze, her eyes wide. "Me?" "Yes, you," he said firmly, "because this began with your heart." She looked out at the quiet lake, thinking of the woman who had once sat under a broken streetlight, whispering blessings into the morning air. Then she turned back to Lucas, her eyes shining. "Then let's do it," she said simply. And right there, beside the lake that held both endings and beginnings, two people from opposite worlds, one born into wealth, the other born into struggle, joined hands in purpose. The story of the poor food seller who fed a homeless widow had become something much larger. It was no longer just about hunger or charity. It was about second chances, forgiveness, and the truth that kindness is the only currency that never loses value. But life still had one more twist waiting, a secret from Ellen's past that neither of them saw coming. The rain came suddenly that evening, falling hard against the windows of Hannah's small office in the new Ellen's Table headquarters. The room smelled faintly of food, paper, and fresh paint. Outside, city lights flickered on one by one, reflecting on the wet roads below. Hannah sat at her desk, hands still, eyes distant. It had been 6 months since the restaurant chain had launched, and every day still felt like a dream she hadn't fully woken from. Posters of smiling customers and workers hung on the walls, and the name Ellen Hayes Foundation shone proudly on the front of every letterhead. She picked up the old brown notebook that Lucas had given her, the same one Ellen had carried under the broken streetlight. The cover was even more worn now, the pages soft from being read so many times. Each name written in Ellen's gentle handwriting carried a story, a person, a reminder of kindness. But at the very back, behind the final entry, Hannah had recently noticed something she hadn't seen before, a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. She had been too afraid to open it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. "Come in," she called softly. Lucas stepped inside, rain still glistening on his dark coat. He smiled when he saw her. "Working late again," he said lightly. "You never change." Hannah smiled faintly. "I could say the same about you," he laughed. "Fair, I just came to check on the week's reports, but mostly I wanted to see how you're holding up." She hesitated for a second, then handed him the notebook. "I found something," she said quietly. Lucas looked at her, curious. "Another note?" She nodded. "It was hidden in the back. I think it's from your mother." Lucas's expression softened immediately. He took the notebook gently, like it was something holy, and unfolded the paper. His eyes moved slowly as he read. After a few seconds he stopped, his breath caught. "What is it?" Hannah asked, her heart tightening. Lucas swallowed hard. "It's a letter," he whispered, "to both of us." He cleared his throat and began to read aloud, his voice trembling. "To my son, and to the kind woman who fed me. If you're reading this, then I have found peace. I left home not because I hated the world, but because I wanted to see if love could still survive outside it. What I found in the streets was not just pain, but grace in places I least expected. Hannah, you reminded me that compassion still lives in human hearts. Lucas, you must know now what I could not say before. I left because I saw your heart turning cold. I wanted you to feel the world the way I once did. There's something else you should know. Hannah, my son, is not your first connection to me. Years ago, before you were even born, your father worked for our family. He was a driver at Hayes Corporation, and your mother was our housekeeper. They were honest, good people who loved deeply. When my husband passed away, your parents left quietly to build their own life, but I never forgot them. When I met you by the roadside, I recognized your eyes immediately. You have your mother's kindness. You were the child she used to carry on her back while sweeping our kitchen floor. So in a way, you were never feeding a stranger, you were feeding an old friend. Take care of each other, forgive yourselves, and keep the circle of kindness unbroken." Lucas stopped reading. For a moment the room was silent except for the steady rhythm of rain against the glass. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "My mother worked for your family," she whispered. Lucas nodded slowly, still holding the letter. "Yes, that means we've been connected all along. My mother remembered you, she just couldn't tell you then." Hannah covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head. "All this time I thought it was just fate." Lucas smiled faintly through the tears forming in his eyes. "Maybe it still is. Fate just had a deeper story to tell." He set the letter down gently and looked at her. "Do you see what she did, Hannah? Even in her last moments, she was still bringing people together. Even after death, she's still teaching us how to love." Hannah nodded slowly, her heart full and aching at the same time. "She was always more than she seemed," she whispered. "Even when she looked like she had nothing, she carried something holy inside." The next morning, Hannah visited her mother in the hospital. The older woman was sitting by the window, knitting quietly, her hair now streaked with more gray but her spirit still strong. "Mom," Hannah said softly, handing her the letter. Her mother's hands shook as she unfolded it. When she finished reading, tears rolled down her cheeks. "Mrs. Hayes," she whispered. "Oh, she was a good woman. I used to sing for her when I cleaned the house. She gave me clothes when you were just a baby." Hannah smiled through tears. "She never forgot us, Mama. She remembered everything." Her mother nodded, pressing the letter to her chest. "That's why you met her again, my child. God doesn't waste meetings. He ties hearts together when the world tries to tear them apart." Later that week, Lucas held a small memorial at one of the new Ellen's Table branches. He invited the widows, the street vendors, and even the fruit seller from Hannah's old neighborhood. It wasn't a fancy event, no microphones, no decorations, just people who had once been strangers now united by one woman's kindness. Hannah stood beside him as he spoke to the crowd. "My mother taught me that love is not what we say, but what we do," Lucas began, his voice steady. "She proved that one act of kindness can echo through generations. When she sat under that streetlight, broken and forgotten, one woman saw her not for what she looked like, but for who she still was. Because of that, my life changed too." He looked at Hannah, smiling. "Kindness doesn't just feed the hungry, it heals the giver, and sometimes it saves a soul." The crowd clapped softly, some wiping tears. When it was Hannah's turn to speak, her voice shook at first. "I never knew what my small acts could do," she said honestly. "I thought I was just serving rice and beans, but God saw the heart behind it. I learned that no kindness is ever too small. The person you feed today might be the hand that feeds the world tomorrow." After the gathering, a quiet moment passed between them as the crowd dispersed. Lucas looked at her and said, "You know, Hannah, I think she left you more than a story, she left you a legacy." Hannah smiled softly. "Then we'll carry it together." Weeks turned into months. Ellen's table grew across the country and soon across borders. Every new branch had a plaque on the wall with the same words, "Feed with love, not pity." Under Hannah's leadership, the foundation opened free cooking classes for widows and unemployed mothers, teaching them how to earn a living through food. Lucas oversaw the expansion, but he often said, "She's the real heart behind all this." Life slowly wove its rhythm again. Noah, now older and more confident, often helped at the restaurant on weekends. He tell customers proudly, "My mom used to feed people from one pot, now she feeds cities." His laughter filled every room he entered, and people who came hungry left smiling. One afternoon, as Hannah was closing her restaurant, a young woman approached her. She wore a worn-out dress and carried a small baby on her back. "Ma, please," she said shyly, "I haven't eaten since morning." Without hesitation, Hannah smiled and handed her a bowl of rice. "Eat first," she said gently, "then we'll talk." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, you don't even know me." Hannah smiled softly. "You don't need to know a name to show love." When the woman finished eating, she handed Hannah a small bracelet made of tiny beads. "My grandmother used to make these," she said quietly. "She said whoever wears one will never go hungry again." Hannah accepted it with both hands, her heart warm. As the woman walked away, she looked down at the bracelet and realized the pattern of beads looked familiar. It was the same design she had seen years ago on Ellen's wrist. For a brief second, she felt chills. That night, she told Lucas about it over the phone. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Maybe it's her way of reminding us she's still watching." Months later, on the anniversary of Ellen's passing, Hannah and Lucas returned to the lake cottage. The water shimmered under the soft morning sun. Flowers surrounded Ellen's grave, left by strangers who had heard her story. Hannah placed the bracelet there and whispered, "We kept the promise." Lucas stood beside her, his voice low but steady. "Do you ever think about how different life would have been if you hadn't given her that plate of food that first morning?" Hannah smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but then I realize maybe it wasn't me who found her, maybe she found me." They sat on the porch, the same spot where Ellen had once smiled at them both. The air smelled of pine and peace. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Lucas turned to her and said softly, "You changed my life, Hannah, and I think you changed the world too." She shook her head gently. "I didn't change anything, kindness did." He nodded, understanding. "Then let's keep spreading it." As the day faded into evening, the sky painted itself in shades of orange and pink. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the soft scent of rain and wildflowers. A single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, touching the lake like a golden path. Hannah closed her eyes, and for a moment she could almost hear Ellen's gentle voice saying, "Well done, my children." Years later, people would tell the story of the poor food seller and the homeless widow to remind others that miracles don't always start with thunder or lightning. Sometimes they start with a spoon of rice and a heart willing to give. And wherever an Ellen's table stood, someone would always leave one free plate by the window, just in case another hungry soul walked by. Hi friends, thank you for watching this story. Poor food seller fed a homeless widow every day. One day a billionaire came looking for her. If this story touched your heart, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. New York, London, Lagos, Johannesburg, Kingston, or anywhere in the world. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel to support our growth so we can keep bringing you more life-changing, emotional, and powerful stories like this one.